Our next storyteller is a fourth-generation Montanan. Brad Cederberg was born and raised in Missoula. When he's not working with clients as a financial advisor, you might find Brad training for his next mountain bike race, brewing homemade beer, or hiking with his wife, Monica, his sons, Jack and Cormac, and their rescue dog, Mitch. Please welcome Brad Cederberg.
Growing up, my grandmother always stressed the importance of regularity. And I'm not talking about punctuality, I'm talking about bowel movement regularity. To Grandma, having regular and healthy bowel movements was a sign of physical and mental health. And I have to say, growing up, I didn't disagree with her, and I still don't. Try to teach that to my boys. But in the summer of 2005, I learned that not only is it a sign of physical and mental health, but also can teach life lessons. It was 2005, and I was 23, and I was the coolest guy I knew. I was at the top of my world. Down at the bodega, they called me the Prez because I'd been elected a student body president at the university here. I had the best job I could possibly think of, bartending at the depot, and it was still, I love that job. And I was dating a beautiful, intelligent sorority girl who would later become my wife. But I was about to be taught a lesson. As part of a student body president, I was invited on a trip to Israel. They were taking rural student leaders and teaching them about Israel and the conflict in the Middle East. And I remember we were doing conference calls and learning about this. And I remember less about the topics and about what we were learning about, another opportunity I passed up at that age to learn, and more about where I fit in the social network of the group of people. I wasn't going to be the smart guy because there were a lot of smart people there. I was never going to be the quiet guy, and so I decided that I was going to be the cool guy and try to keep that going. So as a cool guy, and this would be me sitting in the UC listening to a conference call with a pop collar and a faux hawk and cargo shorts and flip-flops. If you know that guy. And I should have known that a lesson was coming because I grew up in the 1980s and I've seen The Karate Kid and I've seen those movies. And I know that the cool guy at the beginning always gets it in the end. So we get on a long flight and we head to Tel Aviv, and I was able to display two of my cool guy talents, which I still have today. One of which is sleeping. That drives my wife crazy. I can do the wheels up to wheels down sleep on most flights. And also guts of steel, which will come up later. When we get to Tel Aviv, I was surprised. Another child of the 1980s, I thought it was going to be like Indiana Jones. I thought that there would be markets with wicker baskets and people in turbans and one of those guys with a big scimitar sword. But Tel Aviv is not like that at all. It's more like a cross between LA and Phoenix. It's a city by the ocean and kind of built up and grew up in the 50s like LA did, a lot of that similar kind of architecture and feel, but it's got the oppressive heat of Phoenix. And the other thing that surprised me, which was really interesting, was the guns. Now, I wasn't that surprised that there were people with submachine guns and uniforms at Ben Gurion Airport when we arrived, but what I was surprised about was people carrying firearms all over. People in plain clothes with what I guess were Uzis. I don't know names of a lot of guns, but I've been around Montana and I'm not uncomfortable around guns. But what I later came to find out was in Israel, you were required to perform military service. And for 2 years, usually between 18 and 19, you have to serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. And as part of that, you carry a weapon. It's not just to look cool or for intimidation. It's because one of the things we learned is that constantly there, wherever you're at, there's a small fear that there could be a suicide bomb or the building you're in could get hit by an RPG. Now, I don't want to oversell it. They kept us very safe, but we were never without armed guards. And I had fun learning a little bit about the bars and culture of Tel Aviv, but what I brought to them was not any of this wonderful Montana heritage I have. It was Jaeger bombs. So those of you who are about my age maybe know that that's a mixture of Jägermeister and Red Bull, which is awful for you. But that was the cultural gift that I gave to Tel Aviv. So after a few too many Jaeger bombs, I passed out in our rooms in Tel Aviv, and we woke up the next morning and we had a trip scheduled on a tour bus with no bathroom, which will also come up later. But we toured kind of a winding tour. We were headed up to Golan, which maybe you've heard Golan, the Golan Heights. It's an area kind of in the west of Israel that borders Syria that has been in conflict for thousands and thousands of years. But one of the interesting things to me too was how close all of these things were in what people call the Holy Land. I grew up going to Sunday school and remember thinking that the trip that Jesus and Mary took from Bethlehem to Jerusalem was just a long road trip. It's 3 miles. It's really interesting. I mean, it's funny, but that was interesting to me. And now I look back and I think of my wife who hiked the M when she was over 9 months pregnant with our first son. And I think, darling, the Virgin Mary has nothing on you. So we go up this winding path to this kibbutz in the Golan Heights. And if you're not familiar with what a kibbutz is, I think it's kind of a combination of a summer camp and a Hutterite colony. And bear with me, because there's a religious center, and oftentimes in a kibbutz, you'll live off the land. People go there to refresh and learn, but also there'll be people that are on their spring break or people that are retirees that come to volunteer. And it was wonderful because after this hot, oppressive heat, we get up in the Golan. You can see Damascus in one direction. The other direction, you see these beautiful fields. This is, after all, the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization. And I remember thinking as we were eating our farm-to-table dinner, first of all, the chicken tastes a little funny, but also that we had these wonderful vegetables, and it was this kind of spiritual thing, and there was a cool breeze, and it was wonderful. So I go to bed and get one of those nights of sleep that you only get after you've had too much to drink the night before, and wake up and feel like a new man. It's starting to get hot, though, and not only temperature-wise out in the air, but like right here in this area. But remember, I've got guts of steel, so I kept it going. And we get on the bus, and we start to go down this winding road down from the Golan Heights. And it's a little bit like, I would say the same width and size as like going to the sun, but instead of the beautiful mountains of Glacier Park, you've got something that kind of looks like Joshua Tree National Forest, kind of these weird gnarled pine trees and desert. And my stomach is getting worse. And I start to sweat, and the faux hawk starts to droop just a little bit. And I start to kind of walk up to the front of the bus, and I talk to our tour guide, and I tell her, I'm getting close, still keeping my cool. I'm getting close to needing to go to the bathroom. Can you, next rest stop, can you pull over? And she points out the window, and we look out the window, and there's a yellow sign with a red triangle on it, and it had something written in Hebrew and Arabic and English, and it said, "Danger, minefield." So I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like this, but there are no rest stops in minefields. So we look at finished. I said, okay, and I tried to keep my cool, and I'm a little hunched because I know that if I move and something shifts inside me, then everything will shift inside me. And I say, and I'm sweating now thinking about it. And I ate at El Cazador just now. It was wonderful, and I feel fine. But I look at this tour guide and I say, look, I gotta stop. And I looked at the trash can right next to the bus driver. And she gets the idea, and the bus driver speeds up, the bus lurches, and I almost crap. But I didn't. We get down the edge of bus, and I'm sitting there like this, unable to move, clenched in, like the middle third of my body is immobile. And I see the rest stop, and I get off the bus and I run. And by run, I mean run as fast as you can without moving the middle third of your body. So I waddle as fast as I can, and I get to the rest stop, and right as I get to the door, I feel like a runner, the runner's high when you're about to finish a marathon. I feel like I'm about to do this, and I'm about to evacuate. And someone says, stop. And I stop, and I reclench, and I look down, and there's a little Israeli man sitting next to me, and he's got his hand out with a little cup asking for change. And you've seen this if you've been in European cities, that sometimes people will camp out and ask for money. I said no in slow motion and pushed this nice little Israeli man out of the way and ran into the bathroom and evacuated and unleashed everything. And I felt wonderful, except for when I thought about when I was going to have to go back on the bus. And when I did, to get some change and go pay the man, nobody said a word. And I learned that day that the guy who thought he was the coolest guy in the world, looking back, was not the coolest guy because of what I had or who I was, but of how I treated other people. And I paid the man his change, and I thought Grandma would be proud. Thank you.